So, since we met here at the Garage Music Studio, that was the best option we could find. I think we can start sharing our pain. I'm not sure if you understand mine. As you can imagine, what musicians usually do is that they do creative stuff. They compose, they create new licks, new phrases, and having that as a job seems to be a dream. But it's really not. And the reason for that is because as much as we have creative tasks, we have routine tasks. They're also connected with intelligence, which I believe is your thing, at least the artificial part of it. And the great example of that could be transcribing music. So for example, at the moment we hear a chord, and since I'm not a superhuman, I cannot recognize what are the exact notes in it. And I can spend like hours and hours figuring out, checking out with my guitar if that sounds right or not. And there also is like more complex information, like for example, we have a legato line. Which could be even harder to figure out for a human. And I want to ask you, is it possible to use AI to complete such tasks? Is it possible to get the exact MIDI notes from an audio recording?
Well, I think there isn't really a reason why this isn't possible. I think there are actually practical examples of it being used in music production programs, and specifically plugins for capturing MIDI from the audio that you recorded, either from an instrument or, for instance, you use a sample pack. You want to change individual notes, and to do this, you first need to pick the notes from the sample. So I think this is possible, but I also think this doesn't really require much of AI in this case, because, well, I'm an AI specialist, and well, what AI does is it tries to find cause and effects relationships in data, and when you want to use AI, you need to understand the reason why you want to implement such an algorithm in your task is when you don't understand the local cause and effect relationships, when you don't understand what algorithm you want to construct to solve your task, to implement some solution. But in this case, I think there are solutions. Well, in your case, for instance, picking individual notes on the piano, or say when you just play individual notes on the guitar, you can just pick out specific frequency notes, the frequencies, and then convert them into the notes. I don't think this really requires AI in a sense.
I think I actually have quite an objection to what you just said, because every single note played either on an instrument or sang vocally is not really a single frequency. And it's very, very far from it. And in fact, so for example, if I play like just one note, the human brain hears only one frequency, the dominant one. And if we send that to a graphic equalizer, we are going to see something like that. So it's going to be waves on the spectrogram. And even with just a human look, even just a human cannot recognize the main one, because these waves, these peaks at certain frequencies might be very, very similar. And that gets even harder than you have not just individual notes, but even like 2, 3 notes, like if you have a power chord. So there are exactly 3 notes being played. And each one of them has a series of overtones. So for example, this note on the E string is, because of the distortion, has almost equal amounts of the fifth overtone, of the octave overtone. And they also mix with the notes which has the tone as a base. So for example, we have the fifth overtone of this note, and this note itself is a fifth for that note, and this is an octave for that note. And we're going to deal with a very, very complex signal, a sum of frequencies. And I'm not sure if it's actually possible to really understand for a human to develop an algorithm which is going to solve that.
Well, I kind of understand your point. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. So what I understood from what you were saying before is that even a single note is actually a combination of different frequencies.
Right.
Or where we hear a dominant one, there are actually other frequencies which are caused by different characteristics of an instrument that you're playing, like acoustics of materials and other stuff.
No, there are three parts to the frequencies that are present in a note. So the first part is the main tone. The second part is natural overtones. So those are simple mathematical correlations. So you're going to have like 3 times the frequency, 2 times the frequency. And there also are the tones that, as you just said, come from the instrument. And those are not really mathematically beautiful.
Well, those are noises, right?
Yeah, noises, but these noises are crucial, and in terms of the guitar especially, they might be really almost equal in amplitude to the main signal.
Well, I think on the guitar, there are actually a lot of different techniques that you use to actually play different notes in a specific order, especially when you play them fast.
That's true.
And you also mentioned chords, and just any situations in which you play multiple notes simultaneously. And, well, I think in this case, if it really is not really possible to develop an algorithmic approach to solve a problem, well then, say we want to use an AI for handling this problem. So the first thing we need to understand is, well, of course, we're going to give as an input to the model and what we expect as an output. So in this case, the task is, problem is, we have an audio that is either recorded or, it doesn't matter, right? Just an audio of any instrument, maybe digital one, maybe guitar, acoustic guitar, maybe piano, and we want to convert it into a set of notes on a MIDI. So these will be our input and output points. Then we'd actually want to understand how we're going to train this model. So say we have the input data, in this case the audio. So one approach I see is actually have a huge data set of different audios, of different instruments. They can be tagged. For instance, this audio came from a piano, this audio came from a guitar. We can actually teach different models, try to understand specific instruments, and then combine them into one. There is an approach where you can take multiple models and then combine the output of those and get something meaningful for it. There is this kind of approach. And there is also an approach of trying to build a big model, which will try to understand all the relationships in the data that are related to a variety of different instruments. So in this case, how we see how we can tackle this problem is actually create a huge data set of audio marked by an instrument, maybe some characteristics of an instrument. They can be generated either by an algorithm or another model can be trained to understand the characteristics that can be meaningful for the model to train on. And then, well, we provide a set of outputs, which are the MIDI points, which are the notes. And in case of guitar, this will be viable because, as I've said, and as I think you would like to mention, we actually have multiple different techniques that we use on higher speeds. They generate a lot of noise, and we would like to get rid of it. So giving a model...
That's kind of the other implementation I was going to talk about, getting rid of the noise.
Yeah, I think giving a model like a huge amount of examples on how different techniques generate the same notes, right? It will be really meaningful, and the model will train on them, and then we'll have this kind of algorithm. And now, before we would continue, I'd say that I don't think this model will be really huge in a size. So I think it is possible to make it downloadable on any computer, maybe even on mobile, and then integrate it into the music production programs. So I think we can tackle it. It is solvable, and specifically with AI, I don't see any problems other than just creating the training data set. So that is my opinion on...
Yeah, I get it. That's kind of what I pictured. Maybe that's because I'm not that proficient with AI. I still have a suspicion that it's going to be very, very hard to train that model. And I have kind of an idea. I'm pretty sure that we can also use some algorithms. So for example, we could combine a basic algorithm that is going to make some very, very approximate Fourier analysis of the sound, which is going to deconstruct the loudest frequencies. And theoretically, we could use an algorithm to split the sound between two parts. So part one is the notes and the overtones, and part two is the noise that's coming from the instrument.
So I would like to actually, I actually have questions on, I understand the Fourier transform part, where you can get a set of frequencies with relative amplitudes from the audio file. I think this would actually be the main input to the model, which is a spectrogram. I don't understand how you're going to pick out noise from the spectrogram, because, well, how you see this, the easy approach, the dumb approach, one could say, is just to get the peaks, right?
What exactly?
The local peaks in the spectrogram, and those will be essential for the model, but it will also add noise for the model to understand how it relates, right? Or we would just remove noise all along the input data and just give the model the peaks.
I believe there could be use for analyzing both of the parts, but separately. I'm not sure what is going to be the exact process of doing that, but I still believe that there's going to be some use for it.
I actually think this approach can be actually used for generating the sound, so doing the process backwards. And I can explain what I mean by this. So for instance, there's this algorithm that is used for translating from one language to another, and it's called attention-based models. So, of course, for instance, the Google Translate, they don't have hundreds of models for translating from one language to another. And then, for instance, if you want to translate from Russian to English, and then backwards from English to Russian, this is the same model.
So you mean that instead of like, if we have 100 languages and we're going to pick out every single player that's possible to match, and instead of that, we rather have a non-verbal medium.
Yes.
Through which the information goes, and it goes into another language.
Yes, and actually a more practical example for this, which is kind of popular right now, nowadays, is called large language models. They don't just understand the notion of language, they understand the notion of anything, any reasoning concepts. So one could say they understand the external world. Well, this is a conspiracy in my opinion, but they're also based on the same algorithm as translators do, the language translators. So what I was going to say about language translators is that they use this algorithm, which is called attention. So this is actually also applicable to audio and sound, because in a way, language and sound are close, incredibly close. For instance, well, what do we use to communicate? We use speech. And speech, well, it is a temporal data. So, for instance, for you to recognize that I say a specific vowel or a specific word, you need to actually listen to me. You need to have an attention. You need to understand the temporal input that I give to you. So, whenever I mess up a specific frequency at a specific time, you will have troubles with recognizing what sound I'm making. But you will, right? So, the thing is, the speech, the audio itself, is in a way related to the data that is used in these language models and the translating algorithms. So the algorithm itself, what it does, that is used in translators, is it tries to first abstract away the data that they give to it. But what's important to remember is that they take a sequential input. So what does it mean? It means that every single data point is related in a way to another data point. In this case, we have a temporal series of data, and of course, the data that was recorded after a specific time interval is actually related to the data that was recorded in the past. So the audio can also be passed in a way, just transformed in a different, using different algorithmic approach into the data that can be handled by those models. So this is actually called tokens. In natural language, the tokens are just words or individual parts of words, maybe individual vowels. And those tokens are passed into the model. And what the model tries to build is it tries to predict the next token. So in this case, say you give a model an audio file, a spectrogram. And the model's task is to try to predict what's coming next based on the context. In this case, the context is an audio file. So say the model tries to synthesize the sound of a guitar. The problem with synthesizing the sound of a guitar, as I understand, is we've already mentioned the different techniques that are used to, on the right hand, the different techniques that can be used on the left hand, I know. But the thing is, those techniques generate a noise that is in a way related to a guitar-like instruments. And what's interesting about this noise is that this noise actually is local. This noise is dependent on parameters, on different stuff that is happening in a specific time moment that you record in an audio. So no two noises are the same. But
yeah, that's actually what some people name
it is in some way chaotic.
Yeah, and that's what some people name to be the problem of digital amps.
Yeah.
So people believe that, for example, we have that thing over there. That's your Marshall JVM 21011, I guess. I'm not really proficient with the tube amps. So anyways, we have this big clunky head of an amp. And what it does is that it makes all the air in the room vibrate. It shakes the room. We're not actually using that one, we're using the orange one in the back. And this shakes the way the air moves through the room. People believe that it's really random and that it actually makes the tones difference. And the digital models of an amp cannot produce that, they cannot imitate that. My own opinion on that is that, yeah, the difference is still because of the air in the room, but it's all about the proper reverberation. Because, like, you know, there has to be some kind of a function that defines the equalization of the sound, that goes back the exact time which the sound takes to go back, and it's all depends on the frequencies, and that's quite hard to nail.
Oh, I agree. But what I wanted to also say about like the locality of the noises that are generated by different instruments, and what kind of gives the feeling of an instrument, is the reason why like the way that the system is chaotic and the locality are related is pretty simple. Like every next moment, every noise at a specific time interval, at a specific moment, depends on the noise generated at the previous time interval. So in this way the system is local. So there are lots of local cause and effects relationships. There are lots of different equations, one could say, that could actually describe this. But why we use the eye in this case is because there are lots of them, and they're really hard to simulate. So for instance, take the weather forecasting. Like, there are lots of equations that describe air, that describe water, that describe different ways in which air deflects or, for instance, gets over mountainous regions.
So there are like algorithmical, numerical methods to actually tell the weather, but I think your point is that they're just too complex to actually go for them.
Yes, that was my point. There are lots of different stuff, there are lots of different systems that you need to simulate to actually have a numerical solution for the sound of an instrument. So it's not just, for instance, simulating the acoustics of an instrument, right? It's actually understanding the, like, for instance, again, as I mentioned, the technique, the way that your fingers flow over the strings, the body of your guitar, or, yeah, so there are all different aspects of acoustics, and there are and there are specific equations that describe them. So it's really hard to write out the physics for it. So that's why we use AI for this. And, well, actually, I mentioned weather forecasting, and for weather forecasting, they use the same model architecture. They use transformers with attention. So there was this project by Google. It was called DeepMind, and what they did is they forecasted like weather globally.
Where the Chinese AI names derived from.
Yeah, so they predict like the mesoscale model of the Earth. They predict the flow of air. They predict the just global weather forecasts all over the planet, and they do this with a really simple AI-based algorithm, which is based on the transformer model. And it's actually so simple, it's so easy to set up, that you can right now download it on your PC and run it. And instead of actually waiting for hours for it to generate a weather forecast, like the example in the case of the instruments would be just running the numerical solutions for the acoustics of different mediums around the instrument and different materials and all this other stuff. Instead of waiting for hours for computing the physics of this stuff, you could just run the algorithm, and based on the data that was trained on, and we kind of already talked about it before, well, it could synthesize a sound in a matter of seconds. So in the case of weather forecasting, it can generate you a forecast for a month in just 60 seconds, which is wonderful. I think there is a room for making it real time, which is also interesting.
So yeah, and actually coming back to the talk of MIDI and transcribing, I know that there are existing solutions. For example, I think that's an example of an algorithmical solution. So there is a Roland MIDI pickup for your guitar. So for example, I would mount it instead of, they have different models. So I could mount it instead of this one guy, I could mount it in the back. And the thing uses algorithms to get the MIDI. It kinda comes from the pre-AI era, but it still works very fine, and I guess that's the best thing you could use now to complete the goal. So I can't recommend it enough, and yeah, you could go for that. Also, there are some solutions actually based on AI, I think. There is a VSTi plugin, which is like a complete software solution. I've tried it and it's awful, it's crap. Because it has lots of trouble with exactly the noise part of the signal. For example, I would just pick one note. And you hear these as separate strokes. So for example, you can really count that I'm doing 4 strokes per relaxed tone. But the AI thing cannot do that. For some reason, it has troubles with that peak noise part. But if I would go even very fast, and it would nail this line.
So the problem is noise.
Yeah, because it pretty much gets all the actual tones, but it has trouble separating the same notes with the percussive sound.
But aren't there existing solutions for removing the noise from an audio?
No, that's not the point here. The point here is that the thing doesn't hear the noise, which is very important. Okay. So here in this case, the note is the same, but it is strummed for some number of times. So it has to be counted as the same note played multiple times. And what separates these soundings of the note is the noise of the
okay,
thing.
I got it. So understanding the starting moment of when the note is played, and then the ending moment. So yeah, I got it. Well, it's interesting.
So if you look into the musical part, you hear the same tone droning.
Yeah.
But if you go to what's actually played, including the noise part, you hear that over this drone of the notes, you hear big strokes.
Yeah.
That are noise.
Well, I think there isn't really a reason, again, why this problem can be tackled by AI. I mean...
Yeah, that's just an observation that's definitely a problem for now.
Yeah, but, I mean, the way we could just handle it is, again, by cleverly constructing the dataset. So we could actually set out human listeners, or just maybe in part use it in some kind of automation, but then cleverly adjusting the data of having a time series or just time codes for moments where specific notes are played. That's actually really interesting, especially when you arpeggiate chords. Like in the guitar, for instance, when you play a chord, you don't actually stroke all the strings at the same time. You have a delay.
Yeah, there is a millisecond difference.
Yes, and in this case, I don't think it is really that much important. But when you want to resynthesize a sound that you just got from MIDI, and you want to sound it in a manner that is guitarish, for instance, you would really like to arpeggiate the notes that you recorded. So there's this thing which is called Humanizer. I know there's this thing in FL Studio where you could actually randomly adjust the notes so that they sound like they're played on a MIDI guitar.
Met the need for such thing myself. So there is a plugin for bass guitar. So we guitarists think it's below us to actually buy a bass guitar, and usually would go for a VSTi or some kind of a contact library. And the one I have, I actually pirated that one. It's called Humensky Bass, and it has that humanizer knob.
Yeah.
So you crank it, and it randomizes the moment of exact peak strokes. It kind of randomizes the velocity of the sound. It kind of randomizes the dynamics and all that stuff. And I didn't understand how much that is important before I tried another plugin, which didn't have that option. And even though I sent it into like an amp simulation, so it only simulated the DI sound without the amp, it still sounded very, very robotic.
Yeah. I've also noticed this.
Actually, speaking of the amp sims, so as you know, I am broke, and therefore I cannot afford myself such a thing. I cannot afford myself to have, again, this big guy, and also I cannot afford myself to place that big guy in my flat and absolutely kill all my siblings and parents with it, because that's not really practice.
That is violent.
Yeah,
Sounds violent.
even that orange thing in the back, and even that PV, kind of a crappy one. Even they are kind of too loud for usual practice applications.
Okay.
And what I usually use is simulations of an amp. So on my PC, I have something digital. I'm not going to like categorize it into either an algorithm or an AI that takes my DI sound, and DI means direct input, so which is just the sound of the guitar with no effects, sends it into the VSTi, and then gives me an amplified sound with all the effects. And as far as I know, these things are actually made with AI. So what I think is done is that a specific team of guys take their time, set up the exact rig, and rig means, you know, a set of an amp and a speaker. They send as much notes as they can into that, and they record it, so they get kind of a DI input and an amplified result, and they have some kind of a set of parameters. So they have, I think, multi-band distortion and EQ, so these two algorithmical effects, which have their parameters set by the AI that goes through this whole data set. And usually the amp part of these things is totally fine. So, for example, I would totally go and like grab an amp sim and run it through a real speaker and then record. And it would sound absolutely the same as a real amp, even better. And it would be a lot more handy. But the speaker part is awful. Like, they don't even remotely get it. Even if I send the thing again into a tiny, tiny speaker that I have and record it then on my phone, then it will sound a lot better, because there is actually real reverberation. And again, why I'm bringing this up is that maybe I could improve on this cabinet simulation thing, on this speaker simulation thing, to actually get a realistic sound.
Oh, I think this is actually a relatively easy problem to solve, because, well, you can record the sound without an amp and with, right? At the same time.
Yeah, but that's not about the amp, that's about the speaker.
Yes, but like record the sound in the speaker and then without. So
Right.
like you have two audios. Well, then we don't really have much of a problem with creating a data set, right? We have.
Yeah, that can like even be done automatically.
Yes, I mean the
Doesn't
thing is we can just
require too
record
much
a lot of.
working.
Yes, we can just record a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even get it from internet. I think there is a room for automation here, and then just create a simple perceptron-based model that will just try to produce the sound as close as it is in the second recording with the speaker, and that's it. I mean, if this really is that much of a problem algorithmically, well, yeah, I can really improve the situation.
Actually, I think that I kind of get why the technology is flawed right now. Because the way it's done in the software is that the whole simulation of a speaker actually gets squeezed out into an EQ curve. So there is no reverberation part at all.
Oh.
And that's actually like kind of, I don't know, a tip of mine, kind of production secret of mine that I often use, is that I always use some amount of reverb, even like the minuscule amount of it. Even then, like the tone shouldn't be conceptually with reverb, because it really helps to simulate the actual speaker. And there really like some play with the type of reverb you're going to use and the combination of the EQ and the reverb. So yeah, if we actually like go for a different VST structure, which isn't going to be just in plain EQ curve, so then I think it would be actually done deal.
Yeah.
And there is actually another use of AI I can think of. So we got the tone, we got the distortion, all that stuff. We got the amazing guitar, like boom, that's like so nice. But the next step is to actually slap it on top of bass guitar, on top of other guitars, on top of drums. Also like kind of put vocals in there, which is kind of tricky. And there is a whole job based on this problem. It's called, how it's actually called, a producer, a guy who does the mixes. And the job of this guy is not really a creative job. What the guy has to do is that he has to determine the frequencies that are actually important to the instrument, that are actually not. And he has to, for example, if we have the bass guitar, so the middle part of the bass guitar is going to be from, I guess, 1 kilohertz to 3, maybe 2. That's not really important to the notes, to either the notes
So
or
your frequency range.
the noise part. And that's going to be completely scooped out from the bass guitar and given to the actual guitars. So we carve some frequencies from other instruments, and having the empty space, we give it to other instruments. And there is also, again, some play with reverb, some play with compression. For example, if you like play like some hardcore riffs, for example, if you would go for, I don't know, like this stuff, you could probably hear some this kind of humming. So that's kind of a bass frequency that's not really related to the attack. So it goes after the attack and is essentially noise that's not really pleasant to hear. And dynamical compression could be used to actually kill that noise. Yes, if you don't know, compression is about, so you have a range of amplitudes, and compression is about squeezing that range. So the kind of tiniest audible noise gets closer to the loudest audible noise.
So it kind of averages it all out.
Yeah, or another way, spaced it loud.
Or it does the opposite way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we're speaking of the dynamic compressor, it kinda, maybe, it judges the frequencies it hears. That's an algorithmical thing. I'm not sure of the exact way it works. But it listens to what he puts in and kind of closes these gates some milliseconds after it hears the noise. And that's the exact thing you need for canceling some things out.
So it's happening real time.
Yeah. And I don't want to pay the guy who does this. And even more, I don't want to be the guy who does this, because it's an arse job. Like it takes hours, and the result is not, I've always hated working for things being normal. Like, why things aren't normal already? And the whole audio engineering job is about making things normal. So I wonder if we could replace audio engineers with AI. I'm pretty sure that's possible, but there is going to be some speculation about the types of data it will operate with.
Well, I don't think the first question will be about the type of data. I think the first question will be about the reward. The first question will be about how do we judge the goodness of the result? Because, well, before, we really haven't had much of a problem with defining this metric. So, for instance, when we were getting the notes from MIDI, it really just is the problem, the error that the model gives us. We can determine it by just getting the note that we expected and getting the note that the model gave us, maybe specific time moments when the note is played, and give it the error, so it understands when it's wrong. But here, how do we define how good the sound that is produced is?
Yeah, I kind of get it. Like there is a conceptual problem of, training the model.
Yes.
Because
It's
before
not
we
really
had
just about the data. It's about how do we judge the data, how do we classify it and give it out to the model.
Yeah. Actually, I have no idea. I know that there are some actual things that do that. I think that there was some kind of a company that made such a tool, but I haven't tested it, so it could be ours, it could be awful. I don't really know. How do we judge that?
It really is kind of subjective, one could say.
Yeah, because fun enough, there are mixes that some people like and some people don't, and for example, I hate the way like mixes are done in the modern time, because people would rather go nowadays for sounding huge, for sounding like epic, rather than sounding clear. Yeah, but I think the clarity can be judged.
Well, yes. I mean, why I was asking about like determining how good the sound is that is outputted by the model is because, well, let's say that we actually train this model on, say, the modern artists. Like, they are good. They want to give away the mixing process, like the data that was generated. So say the sound that is the output of mixing, and like the initial audio that was the input. Well, then the problem is, if we don't classify this data, if we don't give the model like the basic parameters of how to judge the process, we'll get a mess. It'll try to merge different styles of different artists into one. And this is actually the reason why like it is really hard to scale. It is hard to scale large models which operate on different classes of inputs. And here we just have one. We just have different instruments, we have different audios, and you want to mix them. So this is, I don't really have an answer to how we could actually avoid classifying the data, like avoid judging how the model worked and actually giving away additional information about how the model would want to work. So, I mean, even just how to configure what do we want to hear, like what will be the parameters that we want to adjust.
Actually, I got an idea. So if our main parameter is clarity, then there is a way to judge clarity. And there is an AI model, Moises AI. Yeah, sounds suspicious nowadays. That does the following thing. So it gets handed a mix. It gets a song, and then it separates it into different instruments. So you feed it with a full mix, and it gets you separately drums, guitars, and singing, whatever. And I think that the clearer the mix is, the more accurate and true to the original sounds the individual instruments are going to be after being separated with Moises AI.
Well, the thing is, like, training Moises AI is easier. I mean, it really is. You already have like data set of mixes, and you just get an individual audio. So it is a completely different task. I mean, I don't really see how it's related. How he'd use the output of this AI to understand the clarity of the mix. I don't see it.
So I believe that. So what's going to happen? We have some dataset of pre-made mixes and separated instruments from that mixes.
Yep.
And I mean not separated by Moises AI, but the original ones, before mixing them together. And how do we judge clarity of a mix? We are going to use Moises AI or some kind of different analog. It separates the instruments, and then we compare the original instruments before mixing and then what we got after separation.
Oh, this actually kind of like reverse engineering the data set that is the VSTi string. So like you really reverse engineer the data. That's interesting. I mean, so you can actually understand what audios are in the data set of VSTi. Now as it's trained. I mean, I see where you're getting, but I don't think it'll actually give us the result that we
no,
expected.
I haven't finished. So after we get to compare, we need to develop some kind of algorithmic metric, or again use another AI that judges how well the recordings match.
Oh, wait,
So we get a numerical metric.
Wait, I have an idea. I mean, there is actually an approach. I mean, I've already mentioned it before. I don't really remember in what context, but you can actually have two AI models where one performs any task. I mean, we clearly have a task right here, so we're trying to.
And I guess the other one grades.
And the other one grades, and the thing is that the two models teach each other. Like in this case, the model that is generating the mix is trying to teach the model that is grading it. The model that tries to mark the result that is output by the model actually trains. It gives the data. It gives
It just
the
evaluates the
loss
data set.
for the model. Yes. So it kind of is a really cyclic approach. I mean, there are limitations. There are, of course, problems with using this kind of approach. But the thing is, it works. I mean, surprisingly, it's actually used in the genome editing. I mean, specifically, like, so that there's this project which is called the Human
on this
Genome.
sentence about genome editing, I remembered your phrase about judging what you hear from a speech by context. So, in the beginning of the sentence, I heard gyno, which is about, having big nipples as a male and all those hormonal problems. And sometime after you finished the sentence, I changed my understanding because it took some time in my head to process the context.
Yeah. Context.
Okay, so you suggest, well, I guess kind of the same thing I do. I do suggest to use an additional model to evaluate the results of the former one. And I believe I think that should work.
Yeah,
Why not?
I mean, in any case, you can just run thousands of generations of those models and actually correct the results by a human. So it always requires a human to actually give a direction in which the model should go. I mean, the model can choose one direction, but then in this case, we can use a combination of the human classification of the world by humans and this two-model approach. So, say we actually run, like, say, 30 different versions of this model, so kind of decides on which way to go. But then we as a human, it's like it is in ways related to picking out the genes of a newborn baby, which is artificially implanted in the woman. So we can actually inseminate multiple cells and then see how they evolve, and then pick out those with the best genes. So in this case, we run 30 different versions of this two-model.
It sounds kind of like what Genghis Khan did. But yeah, I guess he used, like, whole women instead of just cells.
So yeah, we can we can just first create different versions of a model, then run multiple simulations. I mean, not simulations, but the training.
Yeah, trial and error.
Yeah, trial and error, and then give a human a task of actually assessing what the progress they've made. And then
I think we're going to
removing.
we are going to have to average the gradings of many people.
Yeah.
So this is kind of. So I think what we just came to is that we have kind of a creative task, and then we kind of separated a more or less objective metric by which we can judge the results. Then kind of got an idea how to actually grade the results without a human and without the subjective component. And I wonder if kind of a similar approach is possible for composing. That's actually another pain, because we have AIs that compose.
Yeah.
But they are no help in composing, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. And why is that? It's because these models generate whole sounds, and they don't have the algorithmical and the classification basis behind them. So they
like they generate the whole audio.
Yeah,
Without-
they either generate the whole audio, or they generate a sequence of notes with no regard to actual music theory, with no regard to some
Actually,
other
I think
things.
they're more for just generating ideas and playing around. Just like ChatGPT image generation. Like, it doesn't really help artists to draw images, but it helps them to get an ideas for what they're going to draw next. I mean, one could use, say, Sunu AI for just getting musical ideas and then implementing them by their own. So,
Yeah, but that's, for example, I work in a niche genre. That's usually shred, but anyways, and these models are going to be no help for me, because again they generate complete ideas.
yeah.
So they generate both kind of, mixed up harmony and melody and all that stuff. And what I think should be done to actually get the thing closer to real musicians and to make that actually helping in composing process, I think that we should kind of teach these things or organize their efforts in more of a structured approach. So there should be such entities in their architecture, in their thinking, such as chords, such as like harmonic functions, such as meters, such as melodies. So they should understand the difference, and there should be some kind of a toolbox embedded in them rather algorithmically. So there should be some strict classification of, for example, scales, of chords, of like whatever stuff. So for example, if I decide to write a progression, for example, if I would go to play, so for example, I play a minor tonic chord, then I would go for example, a fourth in minor key, and then what? What if I sung in some kind of stupor? And what's regular existing musical AI is going to give me? It's going to give me like a full line of music, which is not what I want. I want the next chord.
Oh yeah, so I understand. So again, correct me if I'm wrong. So what you're saying is the AI that would be really helpful for composing would actually understand the notion of chord progressions, the notion of melodies, riffs on the instruments, and like give you away the MIDI part, or just the built up idea, like the fully working mixing and just overall composed part fully, or just specific MIDI outputs like notes, chords.
So yeah, I want these specific notes and not even like full music. I want just specific parts. So again, for example, I would write a melody, and then I have, like, I don't know, 2 chords with a melody on top of them, which I like in the beginning, then 2 chords with melody on top of them, which I again like, and then 1 chord in the middle, which I can't come up with a melody for. And I'm going to ask, that hypothetical AI. So I'm going to ask that hypothetical AI, holy shit, what is going to be the melody on top of that specific chord?
Yeah, that'll be more helpful for creating ideas.
Yeah, and the example of that struggle is usually when you have some kind of modulation or some kind of bizarre stuff going on. So for example, if I decide to nice, it's clean again. So for example, if I go like major key, like some basic stuff, and then for some reason I decide to go into, I don't know, which is a chromatic midi end. And as you can hear, that sounds kind of mind-twisting. That doesn't really sound like a smooth transition.
So you would like it to generate an output like also based on the genre of a music? Or maybe specific artists?
Let me finish. So I want to go from a normal chord to the one that's going to be quite bizarre in a tandem with that one. And even if I develop a chord progression that kind of accommodates that idea, so if I smoothly go from one idea to the other one, I'm going to have trouble writing the melody. And the conclusion I came to some time spent composing, is that there are some rules for actually doing that. And if we give AI those rules, it is probably going to give more accurate answers, and it's probably going to work much faster or whatever. So it's going to work better.
We'll be restricted by the rules, or we'll be given an opportunity to break those when needed. Music theory isn't like a book on how to write a song.
Yeah.
It's just a set of rules that can be used in songwriting, but it isn't like a book.
That's actually a point that I'm like really fighting over with some classical guys, because they're like, oh, so theory is not a tool. Theory is a set of rules. Theory is freaking constitution. Like, we cannot break that. That's no, it's a set of tools. But what is a set of rules is the conception of a genre. So a genre is sometimes a set of rules and specific sounds.
What about jazz?
There are many different kinds of jazz, and those have some rules.
Okay.
So you could go for some fusion stuff, which could be which could have a progression like that, and that sequence of chords is kind of a strict sequence of modulations. They do not go well in a key with each other, but they are not dissonant themselves, which gives that kind of a specific sound of fusion. And there is a rule: the chords should not be dissonant by themselves.
We actually add on here. So, so let's say that we want to use it just for generating musical ideas, like just on writing a specific part of melody, or just generating
Right, so
chords.
some short things.
Yeah. So I don't think we actually need to put on rules for it to generate something structured. I mean, if we just
You mean here the quantity is better than quality?
I mean, yes. If we say generate 5 outputs potential in a specific genre for a specific prompt, say, in a specific context, so like it'll be ChatGPT for generating chords.
Yeah.
Goodness. We
I
can
want
just.
that thing.
I mean, if we would just teach it, say, a style of different artists. So say we have this model for getting MIDI from instruments, and then we actually get a library of different songs, and we tag them by genres, by artists, and then we get the MIDI, we get the notes. Wouldn't it learn those rules anyway? I mean, if given enough data.
Yeah, I guess, because as far as I know, in ChatGPT there is like barely any strict algorithms.
Yes.
So it's completely AI. It's completely learned.
But it solves school homework anyway. In most cases, it's fine.
I actually have a suspicion that it can write chords as well.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure if they're going to make any sense, but still.
I mean, it's like math in ChatGPT.
Yes.
It can give something expectable. It can give something completely random. You can never expect anything.
This whole conversation we just had is kind of. It sounds kind of like that spermatozoid that is going to give birth to, I don't know, some kind of a huge monopolist in the world of musical AI. So that idea of yours that we first train a model to get MIDI from audio, then we're going to use that model to train the model for writing music, then again we can incorporate the mixing model, and overall this thing can result into, like, for example, what kind of huge monopolies we have in certain industries. For example, within I don't know, I think that within musical software we had a monopolist. It was called Steinberg. I think 10 years ago or something, but they lost that monopoly.
What is it?
They did both some kind of hardware for digital processing. So, for example, that thing I have over there, which is hosting our mics, is called a USB interface for audio, and Steinberg does those. They also developed a DAW, Cubase, I think that's theirs. They also developed the very standard of VSTi, so that's their thing, again the VST3. And that's, I guess, the reason why Apple uses AAX. I think they don't support VSTi. And for Linux, I guess there is some kind of limitation. So they have kind of a huge domain, which is musical software, which is digital processing of music. And within that domain, they held a monopoly for some years. So I believe that there is a possibility of that such a monopolist would appear in the sector of musical AI.
Well, yes. I mean, it doesn't really have to be a monopoly. I mean, say.
Well, at least a huge player.
Yes, but I mean, we can have multiple big players. Like there are, in most industries, like there isn't just a monopoly. There isn't oh goodness. there are just a small amount of like big names. So say.
You know, multiple big players is kind of like a concept of sumo.
Oh goodness. So for instance, ChatGPT, right? There isn't just ChatGPT.
Yeah,
there are other models like
there
Google Gemini, DeepSeek. Like there are thousands of different names here, and there are tens of companies, dozens of companies that implements this technology. I mean, if there is one successful business model, is to copy someone's other business.
Yeah, so
in this case, there will be other players. It's inevitable. If the algorithm is approachable, if it's specifically related to AI, anyone can create the same data set. Anyone can create the same architecture, maybe tweak some parameters, and then retrain the model and create something different. I mean, people will create the technology that will try to imitate ours.
Yes, for example, if we speak of the AI that helps to compose, we could have, for example, the first player that would, I don't know, go for more conventional music. That would, for example, go for film scores, which I believe is one of the best implementations, because film scores, I think, make the most money if we speak of things that are composed with great efforts, because they're actually very fun in their composing part. And then I'm pretty sure that we are going to have smaller players that focus, for example, on metal. I think we have some guys rehearsing there. Maybe that's just a drummer. So anyways, we are going to have, I believe, some division of the market by certain specific features of the product.
But I think this will be more of experimental stuff. I mean, there will be some research published on specific, maybe, music genres or specific tasks related to music production. But I mean,
musical research is bullshit. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what's more interesting is that having like multiple big players in this industry of AI-generated music is actually leads to competition. It leads to improving technology overall. I mean, it doesn't really matter if, say, one company does this specifically and the other does this. Their goal is to maintain the business. Their goal is to get more money, to develop, to grow, and they will overall scale the technology that is for AI generated music.
Yeah, and here I guess Grandpa Lenin gets smacked because, again, competition is better.
Yeah. That was what I was saying. I mean, monopoly isn't really a thing, one could say. I mean, Google search is a monopoly, but what other monopolies that exist in the market?
Yeah.
This is more business-oriented stuff. I'm not really into it.
The whole communism thing is kind of about the monopoly that belongs to the government.
Well, government needs to generate music. I mean,
well, sometimes it does. The national anthems.
Well, this is one-time action, you know.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the presidential election is again one-time action.
Imagine the AI-generated country anthem. That would be something interesting to watch.
Imagine a beat maker composing national anthems in like 50 years.
Imagine AI DJ that mixes
yeah.
national anthem. That is also AI generated. Oh, actually, AI DJs. That's something that I wanted to talk about like earlier when we were talking about composing. I mean, there's this thing by Spotify. They created an AI DJ, which browses your library of music and then tries to create smooth transitions between individual songs. So how do you how do you see this?
Actually, that's a very bright idea, because the art of being a DJ is very different from being a regular musician, and it's kind of similar to being a jazz musician, because the the main value in what the DJ does is in improvisation. It is in delivering material and energy right on spot. And here, often, we get the opportunity to get away with quantity rather than quality. So if we are going to like listen to the improvisation of just musicians, like get a single guy with a trumpet, and like pick all his recordings and listen to them, we are going to see that they're quite repetitive, and overall their quality is not like comparable to that of Bach, of like whatever, of guys who do compose for quality, who have limited output, but who are focused on quality. And the same again with DJs. And that's where I believe AI is way better than actual people.
Well, I mean, how I look at this is actually, well, why do people need DJs in the first place? So this kind of a question to you. So, say a party, right? And there's this guy who, yeah. The thing is, I mean, I don't think much of people are going to go to parties without like a DJ, a person DJ. If it would be just a computer desk.
Computer desk.
With Spotify on and an AI DJ.
No, there is a difference.
I mean, like, the DJ field is more about marketing. I mean, it's more about actually having a persona, having an interesting story, an interesting story to tell. I mean, it is a person that is behind.
No, I think you're mixing them with stand-up comics, because...
Oh,
so there is a part to the whole DJ craft about, moving in a fancy way and like screaming funny shit. Yeah, let's go! And all that stuff, like, let's get the party started and let's get retarded.
I mean, it actually gives lives,
But we can have kind of
robot.
an AI character. So we can have, for example, I don't know, we can have, for example, some kind of an anime girl dancing on the screen. And we can model her behavior to be like even funnier than that of real DJ. But that's only maybe a third of what a DJ does. And I think the main purpose of DJs is to, like, imagine you are going to a party. You have to, vibe to a fresh drive. You have to be in the moment. And imagine if all the time on the party plays a song which you heard like a million times.
I mean, the same song.
Well, not always the same, but for example, it's, changed from Macarena to MLboy and whatever.
Yeah, that would be awful.
And the almost sole purpose of the DJ is to alter these songs to make them fresh. DJs don't really have to compose something completely new.
Yeah.
But they have to alter the songs to feel fresh. And I believe that can be easily done with AI, and that can be even better than what real humans do.
Well, yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, even just for human DJs that are parties that are doing all this fancy stuff, they could just use AI for again generating the ideas.
Yeah.
Geez, yeah. And by the way, I mentioned the word robot. I mean, imagine a music band made of robots that play AI generated music.
The first
band.
part actually exists. There is an actual band of robots.
Wow.
That actually have like legs, arms, and they actually play stuff. Like I think they've played ACDs and whatever. But I'm pretty sure that they don't play AI music. So that's what could be done. But anyways, we are sitting here and plotting the depth of other people's work. Because that's exactly what is training AI is about. So there is a very, very prominent moral problem.
I see where this is going.
Even if, especially with the AI that composes, we are going to essentially steal the style of some people.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, ChatGPT is also trained on an already existing text, and if say you want to write a book with a ChatGPT, it is based on other people's work. I mean, on texts.
Yeah, but I think usually the verbal kind of work is usually like much less treasured.
Well, yeah, but I mean there is still something to it. There's art.
Yeah,
There's
such a
art
bold
of
word.
composing it by yourself. I mean, transferring your emotions, transferring some kind of
There is
idea.
art. I guess that's kind of a main theme of our podcast, because there is AI and there is art, and that's the name of our podcast essentially.
Well, yeah.
Well, not our podcast, yours, because I'm just a guest. I'm going to leave at some point. So I guess it's time to wrap up. Speaking of leaving, I think it was well speaking to you, and I think we got many fresh ideas.
Well, yeah, I also agree. That was wonderful. I mean, I've learned a lot of stuff from you today, and it was interesting discussing different ideas that could be implemented sometimes, maybe
And
in the
that
future.
could make money.
And that can make money, right? I mean, why do people?
Money
use
is
them?
always nice. That's
Money.
the thing that a musician has to neglect.
Yeah, it's the basis of society. Everyone wants money.
That's the Great Fetish.
Do people go to music for money? I mean,
Never.
Never do they.
I don't. Well, there do exist there are such dumb people that believe that they're going to be. Imagine that's kind of a survivor's bias. You only know about the musicians that are popular.
Yeah.
So those are the only musicians you know, and they make a huge load of money. So you make a conclusion that all musicians make a lot of money.
Yeah, but that kind of isn't the truth.
Yeah.
Oh. Do you make money from music?
Absolutely not.
Do you plan to make money from music? How do you plan to monetize? If you're planning to make it like a single thing that you do in your life, that's the most good.
Well, that sounds very sweet, but I don't think that is possible. Because imagine walking up to a girl, making your moves and whatever, and she asks you what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a full-time musician, I have a band. And immediately you turn in her eyes, you immediately turn into a broke-ass beggar. Who is also childish, who is also, I don't know, autistic, who is also crazy and whatever.
I mean, imagine when music production would turn into literally prompting, AI, ChatGPT, into getting you the chords. Oh goodness, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, but there's a chance that actually in that phase, music will be kind of like a side hustle. So imagine if making music gets very easy.
I mean, it got easier now. For instance, look at trending popular music right now. I mean, it isn't as good as it was before. I mean, in my opinion, I don't judge.
There is actually a bias to.
Is it because
to what we believe was popular back in the days? We don't remember shit that was popular.
Well, yes, but I mean, don't you see that popular music kind of gets trash? I mean,
I don't, because I don't look there.
Well, that is right. That is completely correct. Oh goodness. I mean, music production really became easier right now. So, for instance, me, I'm a teenager. I can literally compose an EDM track myself on the computer. I mean, EDM is kind of dead. I mean, it isn't popular as it was back in the days. But the thing is, I can compose the whole track myself without a studio with different instruments like guitar. I can just use VSTi plugins and publish it on the streaming platforms and get money from this. I mean, I don't really need a big ass studio.
But imagine that kind of a line getting amplified. Imagine that now, once you have AI, you can make that even easier. And almost every schooler is going to make music, then sell it, and is going to make a few bucks a month for that. We are going to end up in the era of musical death, essentially. Or maybe those are going to be. So again, that's music built with shit and sticks. That music that is based on AI is going to have a different purpose from the music that is made deliberately by humans.
Oh yeah, I mean, for instance, look at the situation with the visual art, with people who make pictures, who make animation. So right now there are these models, ChatGPT can generate you an image, and there are models that can generate you a video. They can generate you an animated movie with not your own voice. I mean, there are still people that will do the artwork.
And there is some place for this and some place for that, because there still are people who are going to show up at a critic of gallery and this amazing picture. And there are people who just have to make an ad. And those are completely different trails that art can go.
Yeah.
And the same, I believe, is going to be with music for, because we have music for ads, and we have music for, like, listening and getting orgasms. And at the same time, we have, like, people who just walk around and want to have something in their ears.
Well, yeah.
So, anyways, I think we are going off the time limit.
Well,
So, yeah,
that was
let's
nice
wrap up.
talking to you. Thank you.